This city was designed to be the future. Sensors everywhere. Waste that vanishes underground. Buildings that think. And yet, it feels like the world ended 20 minutes ago. We spent hundreds of billions building perfect, smart cities, AI infrastructure, IoT networks, digital twins, sustainable design, only to watch them turn into something worse than a failure. Places that technically function but socially don't. And the most unsettling part? The problem often isn't that the technology failed. In some of the biggest experiments, Songdo, Mostar City, Forest City, the systems worked. The dashboards lit up. The metrics moved. The automation performed. But the streets stayed quiet. Because a city isn't a product you ship. It's an organism that grows. It's friction and spontaneity. It's the messy overlap of jobs, culture, families, and the unplanned moments that make you feel like you belong somewhere. So, when planners optimize inefficiency out of urban life, when everything becomes monitored, scheduled, zoned, sterilized, the result can be a place that's stunning to look at and strangely hard to live in. Here's the question that exposes the whole illusion. Why do smart cities keep turning into ghost towns, even with unlimited capital and world-class engineering? And in the next moments, we're going to pinpoint the single missing ingredient that no amount of IoT networks, green architecture, or AI infrastructure can manufacture on command. If this story were just about a few overhyped real estate projects, we could shrug and move on. But it's not. The planned smart city collapse is one of the most expensive urban bets of the last half-century, and it's still happening because the smart city pitch is incredibly seductive. Take everything that feels broken in today's cities, traffic, emissions, crime, waste, inefficiency, and replace messy human chaos with clean, data-driven optimization. AI infrastructure predicting demand. IoT networks sensing the city in real time. Digital twins simulating the future before you build it. Sustainable design that solves climate risk by default. And when that pitch is backed by governments, global consulting firms, and headline-sized budgets, it starts to sound inevitable. But then you look at the scoreboard. Songdo was marketed as a model city for hundreds of thousands, yet it struggled to hit critical mass, and its most futuristic features age faster than the concrete they were bolted into. Mostar City promised a green utopia, then got forced into a quieter identity as an innovation district rather than a living city. Forest City bet on cross-border wealth flows, then geopolitics snapped the business model in half. And Neom, a $500 billion symbol meant to redefine what a city even is, now facing the kind of credibility test that only mega projects can fail publicly. This matters because the next wave is already forming. Right now, city leaders worldwide are being sold AI city operating systems, sensor grids, predictive policing platforms, autonomous mobility corridors, and carbon dashboards, often bundled with financing models that can lock cities into decades of vendor dependence. So the stakes are bigger than embarrassment. When a planned smart city fails, it doesn't just waste money. It can freeze land, trap public funds, create half-built infrastructure, and erode trust in climate resilience and sustainable architecture, exactly when we can't afford to lose momentum. So what actually breaks first in these perfect cities, the technology, the economics, or the humans? A city is a complex adaptive system. That sounds abstract, but it's the key. Cities don't behave like machines where you can redesign parts and expect predictable outputs. They behave more like ecosystems. Thousands of independent actors making daily choices, constantly adapting to each other, to prices, to culture, to weather, to opportunity. And that's why the core discovery behind Smart City Ghost Towns is so uncomfortable. When you build a city from scratch, you're not just constructing roads and buildings. You're trying to manufacture emergence, community, culture, economic gravity, trust, on a deadline. But emergence doesn't happen because you install sensors. It happens because there's a dense network of incentives and interactions that reinforce each other. People move where jobs are. Businesses open where people already are. Culture forms where enough people keep showing up. Safety is partly infrastructure, but also familiarity, knownness, and street-level social feedback. Identity grows from memory. Traditions, imperfections, inside jokes, local legends, third places. Planned smart cities tend to invert that order. They build the shell first, then assume people will fill it. That's the if you build it, they will come hypothesis. But in real urban economics, demand is sticky. Existing metros already have job clusters, universities, family networks, cultural scenes, and transportation links. A new city has to outcompete all of that immediately. Now layer in the technology problem. Smart cities often deploy multiple proprietary platforms, building management systems, energy systems, traffic systems, surveillance systems, each optimized in isolation. The dream is interoperability. The reality is integration tax, custom bridges, vendor lock-in, cascading incompatibilities, and hardware that becomes obsolete within a single tech cycle. So you end up with a paradox. The smarter the city is by design, the more brittle it can become over time, because software evolves fast, but concrete doesn't. When intelligence is embedded into physical infrastructure, the city inherits the upgrade schedule of consumer tech every 5 to 10 years, while paying the replacement cost of architecture. And then there's the human layer. Even if everything works, people don't want to live inside an optimization engine. They want agency, texture, surprise, privacy, friction that produces meaning. So the failure isn't one bug. It's a mismatch between how cities actually form and how planners wish they formed. Next, let's watch this mismatch play out in the flagship case, Songdo. Songdo is the cleanest experiment because it didn't collapse in a dramatic explosion. It's worse than that. It functions. It stands. It runs. And it still struggles to feel alive. The promise was legendary. A fully integrated smart city on reclaimed land, built to house hundreds of thousands, where AI infrastructure and IoT networks would coordinate traffic, energy, waste, and daily life like software. But what emerged was a city that many describe with the same word: sterile. Here's the first crack. The smart features that were supposed to be timeless were designed for a particular moment in tech history. A dedicated home telepresence system sounds futuristic in 2003, but consumer tech moved. Phones won. Cloud platforms won. Suddenly, built-in future became built-in obsolescence. Hardware embedded in apartments that can't gracefully evolve. Second crack, integration. Smart city marketing cells, one brain. In practice, you're stitching together dozens of vendor ecosystems, connectivity, building automation, analytics, sensors, security, each with proprietary standards and competing incentives. Even if every component is best in class, the system of systems becomes fragile. Updates create incompatibilities. Maintenance becomes permanent consulting. The city doesn't become smarter. It becomes harder to operate. Third crack, the street level. Songdo was designed with efficiency and cleanliness as primary virtues. But cities don't get their soul from efficiency. They get from third places and informal life. Small restaurants, weird shops, spontaneous gatherings, local music scenes, corner stores, cluttered charm. When a place is planned to perfectly, wide, polished, surveilled, people behave differently. They pass through. They don't linger. They don't adopt it. And once that happens, when a place is planned to perfectly, wide, polished, surveilled, people behave differently. They pass through. They don't linger. They don't adopt it. And once that happens, emptiness becomes self-reinforcing. Fewer residents means fewer businesses. Fewer businesses means less reason to move in. Less culture means fewer reasons to stay. The city can have beautiful parks and intelligent infrastructure, but without dense social gravity, it's like an airport terminal. Impressive, organized, and emotionally temporary. Mostar shows a different failure mode. The vision gets quietly redefined. A city becomes an innovation hub. Forest City shows a geopolitical version. The business model collapses when capital flows and politics shift. Different triggers, same outcome. No organic mass of everyday life. So if the shell isn't the city, what is? In the next segment, we go straight to the human cost. Why these places can feel lonely even when they're brand new. A ghost town isn't just an economic failure. It's an emotional one. Because what people are really buying when they move somewhere isn't just a home. It's a story about belonging. A sense that, if they get sick, someone knows. If their kid grows up here, there will be friends, mentors, rivalries, memories. If they lose a job, There are other paths nearby. That feeling isn't delivered by smart lighting or an app-based concierge. It's delivered by other humans. Over time, in many planned smart cities, residents report something that sounds small but cuts deep. They feel like they're living inside a demonstration, not a neighborhood, not a hometown, a product. And when a city is engineered as a controlled environment, perfect sidewalks, immaculate zoning, constant monitoring, the social signal can become, don't improvise here. Don't be weird here. Don't take up space here. It's the opposite of what makes urban life magnetic. That's where the ethics hit. Smart city infrastructure often leans on surveillance. Cameras, sensors, access control, data fusion. Even when the intent is benign, safety, traffic management, air quality, the psychological effect can be corrosive. There's a difference between being safe and feeling watched, between living in a community and living in a system. Then there's agency. Many optimized environments remove the little choices that make residents feel ownership, how they cool their home, where they park, what they can modify, what kind of business can open on their street, whether a local festival can just happen. People tolerate inefficiency when it buys them autonomy. They resent efficiency when it takes autonomy away. And socially, planned cities often bake in segregation without intending to. Premium pricing pushes out the service workers who make a place function. If the barista can't afford to live here, the cafe becomes a brand, not a local institution. If young artists can't rent a cheap studio, culture never gets its foothold. If every building is new and expensive, the city loses the old spaces where experimentation is affordable. So the paradox becomes brutal. The more a smart city is designed to be high quality, the less socially diverse it can become. And without diversity of income, age, subculture, purpose, the city loses the very friction that produces life. This is why these projects can feel lonely at scale. The infrastructure is finished, but the social contract isn't. Next, we hit the wow turn, the hidden pattern that links Brasilia and Chandigarh to Songdo and Neom, and why the failure keeps repeating. Here's the pattern that changes how you see every city of the future headline. These projects aren't failing because they're too ambitious. They're failing because they're trying to build the wrong thing first. They start with the city as an object. Skyline, master plan, infrastructure stack, AI city operating system, glossy renderings. But real cities start as relationships. Jobs, trade, rituals, trust networks, informal rules, and the invisible gravity of people like me live here. That's why this story isn't new. Songdo, Mostar, Forest City, Neom today are just the latest chapter of a century-long loop that includes Brasilia, Chandigarh, and the mid-century New Town era. Different decades, different ideologies, same operating mistake. Treating cities like products you can design to completion. Jane Jacobs called it out in the language of her time. Cities are organized complexity, meaning you can't reduce them to a clean formula without destroying the thing you were trying to improve. The moment you optimize for legibility, perfect zoning, perfect flow, perfect control, you erase the messy overlaps that generate life. So the paradigm shift is this. A successful smart city isn't a new city. It's an upgrade path. The future isn't a single grand build. It's continuous retrofit, adding intelligence to places that already have culture, memory, and demand. Because existing cities already solved the hardest part. People actually chose them. That's why the projects that genuinely work don't feel like utopias. They feel like the same city, just easier to live in. Less water wasted, less time lost parking, cleaner air, lower energy bills, faster transit. And crucially, residents still feel like citizens, not beta testers. And once you see this, Neom looks different. Not just big, not just controversial. It becomes the ultimate stress test of the entire top-down smart city model. Can authoritarian speed and unlimited capital manufacture emergence on schedule? Because if the answer is no, if even that can't do it, then the blueprint era ends. Permanently. In the next segment, we'll bring in the real-world playbook from cities that got it right. What Barcelona, Amsterdam, and Medellin did differently, and the practical rules they followed that every future city project ignores at its own risk. Let's translate this into the real playbook. the stuff cities did that actually worked, and why it's almost the opposite of the build a perfect smart city mindset. Barcelona is a masterclass in retrofit smart cities. Instead of building a new utopia, it layered technology onto an existing organism. The point wasn't to dazzle investors with an AI skyline. The point was boring and powerful. Reduce waste, cut costs, improve daily life. Smart water management, smarter lighting, smarter parking. Targeted systems with measurable outcomes. And just as important, the city leaned into participation through platforms like Decidem, treating governance as a civic product residents can shape, not a black box run from the city leaned into participation through platforms like Decidem, treating governance as a civic product residents can shape, not a black box run for them. Amsterdam's approach is even more revealing. Living labs, neighborhood-scale experimentation. Residents propose problems. Solutions get tested locally. The city scales what works. That prevents the classic smart city trap, where technology gets deployed because it's available, not because it's wanted. It also breaks vendor lock-in by keeping systems modular and accountable to users, not just procurement contracts. Then there's Medellin, the most human-centered example in this entire story. Its breakthrough wasn't an all-seeing IoT network. It was connectivity with purpose. Cable cars, escalators, and transit links that cut commutes and stitched marginalized neighborhoods back into the city's economic life. Medellin's smartness was social. Opportunity, mobility, dignity. Technology served a human goal that residents could feel immediately. From these successes, a few real-world rules emerge. Start with pain, not possibility. Solve what residents complain about first. Keep tech modular. Cities must outlive tech cycles, avoid embedding brittle systems into concrete, make technology invisible. If people must learn the city, adoption collapses. Protect agency and privacy. Trust is infrastructure. Lose it and nothing scales. Designed for mixed life. Jobs, culture, housing, and informal third places aren't optional extras. They're the operating system. This is the difference between a smart city as a showroom and a smart city as a place to build a life. Next, we were bound in detention. Why? Despite all these lessons, governments and corporations keep repeating the same mistakes. And what contradictions make failure almost inevitable? So if we already have working models, retrofit, modular, human-centered, why do leaders keep reaching for the giant blank slate smart city anyway? Because the incentives are upside down. A retrofit is harder to market. It's politically messy. You're negotiating with existing residents, legacy infrastructure, old buildings, historic districts, and the unstoppable complexity of daily life. Progress looks incremental, not cinematic. It's governance, not spectacle. A planned smart city, on the other hand, is a perfect product for power. A single map, a single vision, a single ribbon-cutting story. It's clean enough for investors, simple enough for headlines, and controlled enough to feel like certainty. That's contradiction number one. The projects most likely to succeed are the least glamorous. Once you hardwire those systems into buildings, transit, energy, waste, and security, the city becomes an upgrade hostage. A third contradiction is economic gravity. Planned cities often price themselves as premium futures. But real cities need a full spectrum of incomes and uses to generate life. If teachers, service workers, students, and small entrepreneurs can't afford to live there, the place becomes a luxury shell. If corporations don't relocate, jobs remain promise. If jobs remain promise, residents remain hesitant. The feedback loop never ignites. Then there's the geopolitical contradiction. For a city makes the point brutally. A city can depend on capital flows, visa rules, foreign buyers, and political continuity. When policies shift, capital controls, foreign ownership laws, diplomatic tension, the city's business model can evaporate overnight. And finally, the ethical contradiction. Smart cities often rely on surveillance and data extraction, but adoption requires trust. People will not emotionally invest in a place where they feel like a data set. Once the brand becomes monitored, it repels the very long-term residents who create stability. All of this sets up the same. Ending. Delays, rebranding, partial completion, innovation hub language, quiet retreats. Not always dramatic ruin, often a slow downgrade from utopia to real estate inventory. Which brings us to the next question. If the blank slate dream is fading, what replaces it? In the next segment, we futurecast the next decade, what smart will actually mean for cities, and what the post-NEOM era could look like. Over the next decade, the phrase smart city is going to split into two very different meanings. One meaning will keep chasing the old fantasy, the master-planned, sensor-saturated, from scratch utopia. That version will survive in renderings and keynote slides because it's irresistible to institutions that want control. But it will increasingly look like a 20th century idea wearing 21st century branding. The other meaning, the one that will actually shape urban life, will be quieter and more powerful. Smartness as upgrade, not reinvention. Here's what that future looks like. Cities will treat digital twins less like sci-fi dashboards and more like practical planning tools. Stress testing flood response, simulating transit changes, forecasting heat islands, optimizing construction sequencing. Not the city's brain, but the city's rehearsal. AI infrastructure will move from commanding cities to advising them. Decision support for maintenance, permitting triage, energy demand forecasting, and targeted inspections. The winning systems won't be the ones that automate everything. They'll be the ones that explain themselves and can be governed transparently. IoT networks will become smaller and more distributed. Instead of one giant proprietary platform, cities will push for interoperable standards, modular sensors, and replaceable components, because the lesson of Sondo is now obvious. If you embed today's tech into concrete, tomorrow's city pays for yesterday forever. The most successful smart investments will be the least visible. Water leak detection that quietly saves millions. Smart electrification of buses that makes streets calmer. Building retrofits that cut energy bills without changing anyone's identity. Heat resilience design, shade, trees, reflective materials, paired with smart measurement. And socially, the next decade will force a new metric, belonging. Cities will start measuring not just mobility and emissions, but trust, participation, and resident agency, because without those, adoption fails. The big twist is this. The future city of tomorrow probably won't look radically different. It will feel different, more breathable, more reliable, less wasteful, more resilient, and still full of unplanned life, which means the ultimate status symbol won't be the perfect new city. It'll be the old city that learned new tricks without losing its soul. Next, we close the loop, the core lesson, the viewer intrigue hook that lingers, and what Urban Pulse Innovate stands for in this debate. So what did $200+ billion in perfect city experiments really buy us? A humbling realization. You can engineer infrastructure. You can engineer efficiency. You can engineer dashboards that see everything. But you cannot engineer the one thing that turns buildings into a city. People choosing to build a life there together for reasons that have nothing to do with optimization. Songdo, Mostar, Forest City, and a looming question mark of NEOM aren't just stories about smart cities. They're stories about a recurring human temptation. When the world feels chaotic, we reach for designs that promise control. And we mistake control for livability. The future of cities isn't going to be decided by the shiniest megaproject. It's going to be decided by the places that do something much less cinematic and much more difficult. They retrofit, they listen, they iterate, and they protect the messy conditions where a community can actually grow. And that leaves you with a provocative thought. If the real operating system of a city is trust, culture, and daily encounter, then the most important urban technology of the next decade might not be AI at all. It might be governance. Because the city that wins isn't the one with the most sensors. It's the one where residents believe the sensors serve them, not the other way around. So here's the question I want to leave hanging in your mind. When your city gets smarter over the next few years, when it adds cameras, predictive systems, dynamic pricing, automated enforcement, will it make your life freer or merely more efficient? And if you had the power to choose, what would you optimize first? Traffic flow, carbon, safety, or belonging? If you want more deep dives like this, where we separate urban tech mythology from what actually works, subscribe to Urban Pulse Innovate, because the future city isn't a render. It's a relationship we're building in real time,